Hi there, welcome again to another video, and we're still fairly early on in our readings in the public ministry of Jesus. Last week, you might recall, we heard about him calling fishermen and having called them to put out into deep water, literally with their fishing nets. He then calls them to do the same in their lives, and they leave everything and follow him. We're going to go another chapter and a bit further on in Luke's Gospel this week, to the point where Jesus has just called the 12 apostles, and straight after that is where we pick it up. It's Luke chapter 6, and it's verses 17 to 26. Jesus went down with them and stood on a level place. A large crowd of his disciples was there, and a great number of people from all over Judea, from Jerusalem, and from the coastal region around Tyre and Sidon, who had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. Those troubled by impure spirits were cured, and the people all tried to touch him, because power was coming from him and healing them all. Looking at his disciples, he said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and insult you and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man. Rejoice in that day and leap for joy, because great is your reward in heaven, for that is how their ancestors treated the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when everyone speaks well of you, for that is how their ancestors treated the false prophets." Well, just before we get into the main bit of what I want to talk about, which is about those blessings and those woes, I just want to say this: you can't fail to notice that there are similarities with and differences from the beatitudes in the perhaps the more famous version we know of them in Matthew's Gospel. Did you spot some of those similarities and differences? In Matthew, he talks of him going up a mountain to speak. Here, Jesus comes down to a level plain. In fact, both of them are different ways of speaking in the idiom of the day about being in the hill country. Matthew has a particular reason for talking about it as a mountain, because of comparisons he's making between Jesus and Moses. And you had 4 blessings in Luke, followed by 4 woes that exactly actually opposed them. And yet all you get are the blessings, the beatitudes in Matthew. Well, that's not strictly true. Matthew has a set of woes too. It's just that they're not in the Sermon on the Mount. They're much, much later in his ministry, not long before he's arrested. And there are scholars who argue that every one of the woes Jesus pronounces later on in Matthew parallels and opposes the blessings of the Beatitudes in the Sermon on the Mount. And also, Luke doesn't have anything like as many Beatitudes, does he? He has about half of the number that Matthew does. And what maybe this is just a little sign that Jesus could have slightly repeated his teaching at different times, but adapted it for different circumstances. So those are just some of my thoughts about those similarities and differences between Luke and Matthew. What I really want to go on to are those blessings and woes, because the blessed life that Jesus describes here, frankly, doesn't sound very blessed to us. What kind of blessing is it to be poor, to be hungry, to be weeping, and to be hated? But Jesus points, to blessings to be found in them. The woes he pronounces are on a style of life that frankly sounds like the blessed life to us, not the condemned life. A life of being rich, well fed, happy, and loved and accepted. Most of us would probably want something like that and call it a life of blessing, but not Jesus. So let's look at these four pairs of blessings and woes. The first one is the blessing of being poor. Well, in what sense? Is that all the poor in the world? No. This comes after the disciples, the apostles, have been called. And many of them, who are the ones being addressed here, remember, are poor because of the things they have given up to follow Jesus. Remember that last week we heard how 3 of them just abandoned their fishing business to go and follow Jesus. Did they still have the same level of income? Not likely, is it? True discipleship always involves us giving up something to follow Jesus. Sure, at times it's fairly obvious things like sins, but as with those disciples who gave up the fishing business, sometimes Jesus says that for the particular way he wants us to follow him, we have to give up something good to fulfill that calling. Not all of us will be called to leave a particular working life like the fishermen were. But it's pretty common that Jesus calls us to give up something good to find something better in his kingdom. Because that is the blessing. It's receiving the kingdom. And then what about the hungry? You see, if the poor are those who have given up something, maybe the hungry, which of course is related, the hungry are those who have had something taken away from them, or something denied to them, something they're unable to have. There's perhaps an example of this that isn't physical hunger, but it is a taking away of something vital for life that a lot of persecuted Christians experience, where some governments will go and blow up their churches or blow up the homes they live in, and their possessions will just be scattered on the street. Something that's basic to life is taken away from them because they follow Jesus. Some of them find that they're not allowed to send their children to school. Others are blocked from taking certain jobs. This is a kind of hunger. Things are being denied to them or taken away from them. It's at nothing like that kind of level for Christians in our culture. Perhaps the sort of things taken away from us today are things like our loss of influence in society. But to all those who do experience the loss that leads to a kind of hunger because they follow Jesus, a blessing is promised. And it's a blessing that they, unlike those who are stuffed to the gills now, that they will be satisfied. It's the promise, surely, of the great banquet in the kingdom of God. Oh, you'll be more than satisfied. You followed me, says Jesus. You had things taken away from you by evil people because you named my name. But I'll make sure you're satisfied. And then what about those who are weeping? Well, the interesting thing here, of course, is it's opposed to those who laugh. And I think I'm right in saying that this is the only part of the New Testament where we get a direct reference to laughter. But the kind of laughter that the Greek word used here by Luke means is not just raucous, healthy laughter. It's rather flippant laughter. It's foolish laughter. It's arrogant laughter. And it's mocking laughter. And therefore, the weeping, as opposite to the laughter, is that of being mocked and rejected. Again, something that comes from following Jesus. Cruel mockery is placed on those who follow Jesus. It would happen to Jesus himself when he's sentenced to death. The crown of thorns, cruel mockery, the blindfolding and stripping of him by the soldiers, hitting him and saying to him, prophesy who hit you. Cruel mockery. There's an old story of a Christian who was being tortured for their faith. I may be wrong, but I think it was in Turkey. And as the torturer inflicted more pain on the Christian, he mockingly said to him, and what can your God do for you now? And the Christian said, he can give me the power to forgive you. Us, it doesn't get anything like that serious, does it? We're kind of afraid of mocking jokes and teasing among our own Christian friends, aren't we? Maybe there's the loss of respect we might endure because of our faith. How can you believe that nonsense? Are you an idiot? And yeah, our hearts are saddened by that, not to the same extent as others I've just described. Where's the blessing? The blessing is that those who weep because of the rejection they suffer as a consequence of their faith, those weeping believers will one day be those who laugh, who rejoice. The great reversal has happened. Instead of rejection, there is the acceptance of God and his vindication at the last judgment. And then the last pair of blessings and woes was about those who are hated. You don't conform to social norms. You're not one of us. Perhaps in that sense it reminds us of other prejudices we find in society. People who don't conform find that the majority who do, most of whom are frankly a bunch of sheep following others, that majority places burdens and inflicts pain upon the minority. Something, again, from the world of persecuted Christians, in those parts of Mexico where to be a Christian, and particularly a Protestant Christian, is to be a religious minority, they find themselves at the mercy of the majority culture in their communities. There are plenty of cases where the community has gone and cut off electricity to the home of a Christian family. And they have then said to the Christian family, you can have your electricity put back on if you renounce your faith. That really is to be hated, isn't it? Us, some hatred comes our way, not of that magnitude though. And sometimes even the little bit that does come our way leads us, instead of going to Christ about it, we have our own clever defense mechanisms. We have our subtle and not so subtle ways of saying to society, well, we're just like you, really. Except, without us wishing to be superior and self-righteous, we're not, according to the gospel. We are, in that strange and vivid phrase from the authorized version of the Bible, a peculiar people. We stand out like a sore thumb. And there's a blessing for those who are willing not to conform to the social norms for the sake of Jesus, who will go his way when it's not the popular way. Yeah, you might be treated like the prophets were, which often means death. But Jesus says you have a great reward in the kingdom of heaven. It may be, or it may feel like death now, but resurrection is coming. So what do we make of all of this? If you just took this as the sum total of all the life of discipleship, it's a pretty grim and miserable life on the one level. But at least Jesus promises the blessings. But Jesus is here open and honest enough to prepare us for the difficulties and to warn us that such difficulties are normal for the Christian. But when they come our way, because we're faithful to following him, then he promises that in the long term there will be blessing. And so, may God bless us now, but as we ask him to bless us now, to help us to understand the trials we go through, may the blessing we experience in this life be a foretaste of the magnificent blessing coming in the life of the world to come. And that's where I'll leave it and I hope to see you next week. Bye-bye.